I was discriminated against all my life because of my golden child sister. Finally, I got my sweet revenge on my wedding day. Hi, my name is Emily Thompson. I was born into a typical American family in the suburbs of Sacramento, California, where everything on the outside looked perfect. A white two-story house, a neatly trimmed lawn, framed family photos on every wall, and a golden retriever named Max. But behind that door was a world where I would always be the extra. My family had 2 daughters, my sister, Jessica, and me. To outsiders, it looked like 2 sisters growing up side by side, attending the same school, wearing matching princess dresses as little girls. But they never saw the rest, the part where I was always labeled the difficult child, simply because I refused to be compared, dismissed, or used as a backdrop for my sister. Jessica was the golden child of the family. She didn't have to try and still got praised. She could do wrong and still be forgiven. When I got a perfect score in math, Mom just said, "Well, your sister just got a solo in the school choir." When I won a statewide science creativity competition, Dad sighed and said, "It'd be better if you stopped competing with your sister." I was a disciplined student, never snuck out, never caused trouble, yet even the smallest lie from Jessica would land me grounded for a month. Every time there was an argument, my parents never asked what happened. They just looked at me with judgment in their eyes, then turned and wrapped their arms around her. I grew up in a home where love came with a condition, and that condition was, you have to be Jessica. I don't remember exactly when I first felt abandoned. Maybe it was when I was 6, when my birthday party was canceled because Jessica had a mild cold. I had looked forward to it for weeks, handwriting invitations for my kindergarten friends, carefully placing stickers on each envelope like they were treasures. I had spent days deciding whether to blow out the candles before or after opening presents. But that morning, Jessica sneezed, and Mom announced the party was off. I remember crawling under the living room table, holding my princess dress in my lap, trying not to cry. Mom didn't apologize, Dad didn't comfort me. They just said, "Don't make a scene, your sister isn't feeling well." Things like that kept happening. Small things like missing my slice of birthday cake. Big things like losing my whole summer. When I was 8, Jessica broke Grandma's antique vase, a cherished family heirloom. She ran upstairs and pretended to read a book, leaving me alone in the living room with shattered porcelain on the floor. Mom walked in, eyes wide. "Emily, what have you done now?" I stammered that it wasn't me, that I had just walked in. But Jessica, with an angelic face, called down from the stairs. "She was throwing a ball in the house, Mom." I told her not to. Without another word, Mom slapped me across the face, sharp, burning, disorienting, and declared I was grounded for the entire summer. Jessica, meanwhile, was sent to an elite art program in New York, painting, singing, even getting her picture in the local paper. I stayed home, scrubbing dishes, pulling weeds, and overhearing her on the phone telling friends, "Little Emily's grounded for being bad." I didn't understand why the truth always got twisted. I didn't understand why my parents always believed her and never asked me a thing. I used to think maybe I wasn't good enough, not sweet enough, not special enough. Some nights, I'd stare into the mirror and try to change my smile, my posture, the way I spoke, hoping that maybe the next morning, when I came down the stairs, Mom would look at me the way she looked at Jessica, with warmth, pride, and acceptance. But every morning was the same. I made breakfast, folded blankets neatly, got a quick helpful girl comment like I was a polite housekeeper, and was forgotten just as quickly. When I was 10, I won first place in the school science fair. I built a motion sensor robot. My classmates and teachers were amazed. When I brought the award home, hoping to hear a word of praise from Dad, he simply said, "Well done. But you need to learn how to share the spotlight." Jessica's feeling pressure because her voice isn't meeting expectations. That night, dinner was quiet, no congratulations, no photo on the wall. No one mentioned my achievement. But the next day, when Jessica placed in the top 50 of an online singing contest, Mom threw a small party with a cake printed with her name. I was assigned to wash the dishes afterward. I slowly learned that in that house, There were two types of mistakes. The kind Jessica made, which were forgiven and forgotten, and the kind Emily made, which meant I would be blamed even when I did nothing wrong. And there were two types of achievements. Jessica's celebrated as the pride of the family and mine ignored, because don't make your sister feel bad. Once, I tried to push back. I pointed out that Jessica had lied, that I didn't do what they were accusing me of. I remember that day clearly. I spoke firmly, without shouting, without tears. I just told the truth. But instead of listening, my mom snapped, "Enough, you're always jealous of your sister. Stop pretending to be the innocent one." I froze. Not because her words were too cruel, but because it was the first time she ever called me you in such a cold, distant way. The 8-year-old inside me crumbled, and the woman I was becoming began learning how to stay silent. Spring, summer, winter, they passed like that. There was always Jessica, and then there was the rest me. When she painted, I cleaned brushes. When she performed, I sat in the last row. When she was called an angel, I was the one we need to keep an eye on. I didn't hate Jessica. Maybe I even admired her glow, her voice, her confidence, but our parents turned us into strangers. One was always chosen. One was always left behind. I remember when I was 12, Jessica had her senior portraits taken at a high-end studio in the city. Mom hired a makeup artist, a hairstylist. The next year, when it was my turn for pictures, Mom said, "Just use your school ID photo. We need to save some money." I nodded and said nothing. But that night, I cried for the first time in a long while. Because I realized something I could no longer deny. In their eyes, I was never the first choice. I was always the backup plan. I was the silence in the music where Jessica was the lead vocal. And that feeling of not being good enough, of being compared and then forgotten, it didn't go away as I grew older. It crept into how I walked, how I smiled, how I apologized too quickly, how I avoided eye contact when I entered a room. I lived most of my life like a shadow, unseen, unheard. I was the one who wasn't chosen. But what they didn't know is that I had quietly been preparing for the day I would choose myself. I started learning programming in 9th grade when our tech teacher assigned a basic puzzle game project. While other students complained and gave up halfway, I was completely absorbed by each line of code, every trial run, every moment when the blocks finally clicked into place exactly as intended. There was something about coding that made me feel in control. Unlike my life at home, where everything felt out of reach, in the world of programming, if you did things right, the system responded correctly. No favoritism, no manipulation, no being dismissed just because you weren't the beloved child. Just logic, fairness, and effort. I was captivated by that feeling, watching something function because I built it with my own hands. From that point on, I spent every evening learning online. I took freelance web design jobs for a neighborhood convenience store. I enrolled in free courses on Python, algorithms, and cybersecurity. I built a foundation for myself, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I loved it. And I knew I wanted to study computer science in college. I wanted to go further, aim higher, and turn passion into a career. For the first time in my life, I had a big dream. But I also knew I couldn't tell my parents. One night during high school dinner, I hinted that I was thinking of studying computer engineering at a major university like Stanford or UC Berkeley. My mom looked at me, set her spoon down, and said coldly, "Jessica has decided to pursue music. We're going to give her everything she needs." I swallowed my words. Dad repeated the same line he always did, like a machine. One family can't afford to send both kids to college. Everyone has to make sacrifices. And who would be the one to sacrifice? There was no need to ask. Jessica failed every public university entrance exam. But that didn't matter. Mom immediately reached out to a private music conservatory in Los Angeles, tuition over $50,000 a year. They were ready to sell the old car, dip into savings, anything to send her there. No one asked what I thought. No one asked if it hurt to watch my dream pushed aside like some frivolous luxury. No one even considered that I deserved to dream. I remember that night, Sitting alone in my room, the light from my computer screen glowing against my swollen, tear-streaked face. I stared at university lists, admission requirements, and application deadlines. I had 6 months to prepare. I no longer had hope for support from my parents, but I had something else: determination and a plan. I started secretly applying to colleges. I wrote essays, asked teachers for recommendation letters, and attended Zoom interviews after cleaning the house, once everyone was asleep. I told no one. I didn't expect much. But it was all I had, and I bet on myself. A few months later, on a Monday morning, I got an email with the subject line, "Congratulations." I had been accepted to the Georgia Institute of Technology. Not just accepted, but awarded a full scholarship for outstanding students in computer science. I stared at the screen, hands trembling. For the first time in my life, a door opened not because someone handed it to me, but because I had pushed it open myself. I burst into tears. But this time, they were tears of joy, of pride. Because after all those years of being cast aside, I finally had something no one could take away from me. But then fear crept in. I knew that if I told my parents, they would do everything they could to destroy it, and if I stayed silent, they'd accuse me of hiding it. They'd say I was selfish, disloyal. They might call the school, create pressure, even force me to decline the offer because the family doesn't approve. I had seen them do something similar to one of my cousins, pressuring her to drop out because the school is too far, and mom is sick and needs help. I knew them. And this time, I wouldn't let it happen. I took a screenshot of the acceptance email and the scholarship letter and decided to post them online. I wrote a short caption. Even when no one believed I could do it, I did. Thank you to myself for not giving up. The post received hundreds of congratulatory messages from relatives, friends, teachers, even people I once helped fix their laptops in high school. I didn't tag my parents, but I knew they would see it. And once that post was out there, once it began to spread, no one, not even them, could stop the path I had chosen. A few days later, Mom brushed past me in the kitchen and said, like a warning, "This family can't afford 2 kids in college. Take responsibility for your own choice." I nodded. "I will, don't worry." Dad just shrugged. "Don't come crying when you burn out." Jessica said nothing. She just sent me a cold emoji with the message, "Good luck, you'll need it." I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad. Because for the first time, I didn't need their approval. I had earned a place not in the heart of my family, but in the world I actually wanted to live in. And I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But this time, I wasn't the girl who suffered in silence. I was a young woman who chose herself, and I was never going back to being anyone's shadow. I arrived in Georgia on a humid August morning. A backpack, a suitcase, an old laptop, and a dream that was all I had. I rented a small room nearly 40 minutes on foot from campus in an old apartment complex with moldy walls and a shower that worked only half the time. But I didn't complain. I had once slept on the floor after being kicked out of my room so Jessica could have her creative space. This hardship was nothing compared to the feeling of starting over in a place where no one knew me as the second daughter, the one to keep an eye on, or the not good enough one. My schedule was packed from day one. In the mornings, I went to class. In the afternoons, I worked part-time at a cafe near campus. In the evenings, I tutored freshmen in math. On weekends, I took shifts at a tech support call center to help cover the utility bills. I woke up at 5 a.m., got home near midnight, ate instant noodles from a plastic cup, and took notes under the glow of a weak desk lamp. But I never felt tired in a bad way. I was learning what I loved. I was living without asking permission. I could breathe for the first time in my life. There were winter mornings when I rode my bike through empty streets in a thin coat, my mind spinning with unfinished lab assignments. There were nights when I passed out at my desk, waking up with a sore back and bloodshot eyes. But I never gave up. I remembered what my mom had said, "You'll burn out." And I was determined not to let that happen. I learned how to fix leaky pipes, replace fuses, sew my own interview dress, and hunt for grocery coupons. I became an adult not because I wanted to, but because no one else was going to do it for me. During those 4 years, I never got a single congratulatory call, a text to check in, or even a birthday gift from my family. When I was accepted into an elite undergraduate research program, I sent Mom a photo she saw it, but never replied. When I was featured on the cover of the university bulletin for developing a software tool that helped visually impaired users read text, Dad only messaged, "Just don't mess up. Stay on track." Jessica occasionally left sarcastic comments on my posts. Even though I was building a new life, the old wounds never fully healed. Every holiday break, when friends went home, I stayed on campus or picked up extra shifts because I had no home to return to. Then one day, I met Ryan. He was a technician at the support call center where I worked part-time. He was the first person who greeted me by my full name, never mistaking it for Emma or that Emily girl. Ryan had a calm smile, a deep voice, and a way of listening that made you feel like you mattered. We started talking during our night shifts. At first, it was just small talk, buggy software, difficult customers, the junk food in the break room. But slowly, those conversations became a gentle anchor I never saw coming. I told him about my dream to study technology, the sleepless nights, the encryption problem that took me 3 weeks to solve. Ryan didn't laugh, didn't doubt me, didn't say, "You're trying too hard." He simply listened and said, "You're doing something amazing, Emily." I had never been seen like that, like someone worth being proud of. Ryan didn't know anything about my past, about Jessica, or my parents. He just saw me as smart, hardworking, independent girl, and someone worthy of love. And that scared me. I had spent my whole life afraid that if someone truly saw me, they'd leave. But Ryan stayed. Even when I told him about the pain, about not having anyone close in my family, about spending New Year's alone with a can of soup from the convenience store, he didn't pull away. He simply held my hand and said, "Then this year, you won't be alone." We started dating a few months later. Ryan taught me how to believe in myself, not just academically, but in the way I treated myself. He was the first person to tell me I didn't have to apologize for my success. I didn't have to shrink to fit into the mold someone else created for me. He took me to places I once found intimidating: a concert, a tech conference, even a meetup with his friends. And at every one of those places, I experienced the same thing. I was treated like a whole person. No comparisons. No dismissal. And I began to open up. I shared parts of me I had long hidden: the dreams that were stolen, the times I was called selfish, the summers I spent grounded while Jessica was celebrated. Ryan wasn't angry on my behalf. He didn't suggest revenge. He simply said, "You don't need their permission to live a worthy life. You're already doing it every day." In my final year of college, I won a prestigious scholarship in AI research and was offered a job at a major startup in Atlanta. When I told Ryan, he hugged me for a long time and whispered, "I knew you'd do it." No one else said that. Not Dad, not Mom, not Jessica. But I didn't feel empty like before, because now I understood love isn't something you have to beg for. It's something you deserve when you choose yourself, despite everything you've lived through. I graduated as valedictorian. In the cheering crowd, there were no parents, no sister. But Ryan was there front row, holding a bright bouquet of sunflowers, eyes shining. He was the first to run up and hug me when I stepped off the stage. I didn't need anyone else. I had myself, and I had someone who loved me for all that I am. No pretending. No being second choice. I stepped out of the shadows. Not because someone pulled me into the light, but because I walked step by step through pain, through grief, through every silent void until I reached the light. And for the first time, I no longer felt small. Because I had found Ryan, the love of my life. We got engaged on a quiet June afternoon, just after I accepted the offer to become a lead engineer at my new company. Ryan proposed simply, without fuss or spectacle, just the two of us on a park bench, hand in hand, the sunlight filtering through rustling trees, and he asked, "Would you want to build a life with me, a life where you'll always be chosen first?" I laughed, then cried, then nodded. It was a simple moment, but for me, It carried more weight than anything that had come before. A promise. A confirmation that I was worthy of love, of respect, and of stepping into a new chapter, one that belonged entirely to me, free of anyone else's shadow. We planned a simple but intimate wedding. A ceremony at the small chapel where I first took Ryan to hear a student tech talk, surrounded by close friends, coworkers, professors, and the people who had witnessed my journey into adulthood. I didn't consider informing or inviting my parents or Jessica. For the past 4 years, they hadn't once shown up. They didn't call after my graduation, didn't send a message, didn't even reply when I sent a photo from the ceremony. To me, they were a closed chapter, a part of the past I had learned to walk away from. But then, a week after the invitations were sent out and word had spread through social media, I received a strange call in the middle of the night. Ryan and I were sitting together, finalizing the wedding menu, when my phone lit up. Mom. My chest tightened. I hadn't saved the number, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Still cold, still sharp beneath a layer of fake sweetness. Emily, I heard. You're getting married? I froze for a moment. Not because I was emotional, but because I was stunned. After all these years, they called not to ask if I was happy, not to apologize, but to confirm a rumor? I replied softly. Yes, I'm getting married next month. She was silent for a moment, then continued. Your father, Jessica, and I were quite surprised. As the younger sister, you really shouldn't be marrying before your older sister. Everyone's feeling a bit awkward about it. You understand, right? I gripped the phone tighter. Awkward. Because I dared to find happiness before she did? My mother didn't answer directly. Instead, her tone shifted into negotiation. Your father and I want to attend, and I think, to avoid any discomfort, it would be best if Jessica wore a wedding dress and walked down the aisle before you. Like sisters sharing a special moment. To give her the experience, you know? She's sacrificed so much already. I laughed. A bitter laugh I didn't even recognize as my own, half pain, half disbelief. You mean, she wears a wedding dress, walks down the aisle before me? At my wedding? I repeated the words slowly, making sure I wasn't losing my mind. Not necessarily your dress, just a wedding gown of some sort. She feels it's unfair if you're the first to be a bride. What will people think? The whole family will talk. An older sister letting the younger one marry first. It's humiliating. I didn't say a word. I just closed the phone, ended the call, and let the silence flood the room. Ryan looked at me. He didn't ask. He simply moved closer, resting a hand gently on my back. After a while, I told him. Every word. Every line. I didn't hold anything back. When I finished, I waited for him to get angry, to demand we call them back, to argue with them. But Ryan simply shook his head, his gaze calm, almost chilling. Don't say no, say yes, but this time, we'll give them a lesson they'll never forget. I looked up, surprised. He continued, they think you're still the old Emily. Quiet, obedient. They think they can control you with shame and tradition. But we can use their own game to end all of this. And two, I didn't have to ask what he meant. I knew Ryan, the man who planned everything down to the smallest detail, and if he said there was a way, I believed him. Because I had spent my entire life living by other people's rules, and I was far too tired to let that continue on the most important day of my life. We pretended to agree. I texted my mother. If Jessica wants to participate, I won't object, as long as it doesn't interfere with the ceremony. She replied almost immediately. Good. The family is happy to see you've matured and become more understanding. Understanding? If that's what they wanted, a compliant Emily, one who bows her head and endures, then they had forgotten I was no longer the girl I used to be. I was now a grown woman, with a career, with love, and most importantly, with the power to protect myself from the manipulation that haunted my childhood. Ryan began working directly with the event planning company. All communication with my family was moved to written format, with signed confirmations, leaving no room for ambiguity. We hired security. A formal agreement was drafted, No one outside of the official guest list would be allowed into the bridal area, and anyone who violated protocol would be removed from the venue. Ryan made special arrangements with the photographer and videographer. Every frame would focus on me and him. No one else would steal the spotlight. My dress was secured in a private safe. Everything was arranged to prevent any unscripted performances. I didn't feel joyful. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt at peace, not because I was about to get back at anyone, but because I was marking the end of an era. The era where I lived in my sister's shadow, where I absorbed the brunt of my parents' frustrations. And if they wanted to witness me on my wedding day, they would have to face a new reality. I was no longer the obedient child they could mold. I was fully myself, and this time, I was walking down the aisle not to share the spotlight, but to walk alone, steady, without asking for permission. That night, Ryan said nothing more than a quiet sentence. "Let me handle it." And he truly did. The next morning, he scheduled a meeting with his company's legal team to go over privacy rights, wedding contract clauses, and potential emergency scenarios. Then, he contacted the event company and booked their premium security package, something I thought was reserved for celebrity couples. But Ryan spared no expense. He said, "You've been protecting yourself for over 20 years. Now I'm here to do it for you." Who? He insisted that from now on, all communication with my family go through email or a third party. No texts, no phone calls, no verbal agreements. Every detail would be reviewed and signed off by legal counsel. In the contract with the event company, there was a specific clause. Only the bride is permitted to wear a wedding gown and walk down the aisle as part of the official ceremony. No one else, including family members, may wear similar attire or perform actions that create confusion. Security was stationed in 3 zones: the main gate, the backstage hallway, and the ceremony entrance. Guests needed a physical invitation to enter, and only those listed by name were allowed near the bridal area, a list that Ryan personally vetted, name by name. My family had no idea. They still believed they were controlling everything, just like they always had. My mother texted, "We've picked out a dress for Jessica. Make sure you let her take the wedding photos first so she can get a feel for being a bride." I simply replied, "Yes. I'll remember." Then came another request. "When walking down the aisle, let her go in a few minutes earlier. It'll surprise everyone." Isn't that a great idea? Again, I nodded. I agree. Ryan would glance at me with a mix of sympathy and amusement each time I read one of those texts aloud. But I understood something important sometimes. To defeat a manipulator, you have to let them believe they're still in control. And we let them believe just that step by step. I pretended to ask politely, "Mom, does Jessica want to do her makeup before or after me?" Or, "Where should we place Jessica in the group photo to make her stand out more?" Every question was like another nod in their familiar game, the illusion of favoritism, control, and being the center of attention. But behind every yes was a trap being set. I saved every message. For the rare phone calls, I recorded the conversations. When my mother requested a private Zoom call to go over the ceremony details, Ryan sat beside me, documenting every word. I wasn't doing this to create drama, I did it because I had spent my whole life being dismissed. I had been told I was making things up, that I was playing the victim, or that I invented lies to make my sister look bad. This time, I wouldn't give them a single chance to say I had misunderstood. As the wedding approached, my mother started acting triumphant. She messaged me, "Jessica looks absolutely stunning in her gown. Who would have thought her little sister would take a step back so she could shine like this? The family really appreciates your sacrifice." I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. They truly believed I was still the same old Emily, the girl who stepped backstage, who gave up the spotlight, just to be called good. But I wasn't that girl anymore. And this wedding would make that crystal clear. A week before the big day, Jessica messaged me for the first time in years. Her text was short. No warmth, no connection, just a demand, disguised with an emoji. "Make sure the spotlight hits me first when I enter. You know how flattering lighting matters." I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and forwarded it to our lawyer. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. We arranged for Jessica to receive a fake schedule, a special version just for the bride, meticulously crafted by Ryan. It included exact call times for Jessica's arrival, photo session, her walk down the aisle before the younger sister, and even a welcome speech proposed by my mother. That schedule was never part of the official contract. It was sent as an unsigned PDF-marked draft. My family eagerly agreed to it. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd step into the crowd, soaking in admiration, praised as the ones who guided their little sister to her big day. As for me, I remained calm. I went to try on my wedding dress with Ryan, a white gown with a square neckline and long lace sleeves, simple yet elegant. I didn't need a tiara or a dramatic mermaid silhouette like the one Jessica had chosen. I didn't need the spotlight from someone else's gaze. I just needed a real wedding one where I didn't have to stand in the background. After the fitting, Ryan held me and whispered, "I can't wait to see you walk out there as yourself, no more bowing, no more stepping aside, no more sharing the stage with anyone." I nodded. I couldn't wait either, not for revenge, but to close a chapter in which I had never been the one chosen. My wedding took place on a Saturday morning beneath a crystal-clear sky. The sunlight dusted across the lawn in front of the chapel like a layer of gold glitter. I woke up before dawn, sitting quietly by the bridal suite window, watching the long shadows of the trees stretch over the still empty parking lot. No one disturbed me. No knocking, no mother's voice urging me to hurry, no sister's silhouette gliding past with perfectly curled hair. Today, no one would take this time from me. This was my day, and for the first time, no one else had the right to interfere. I got dressed with the help of my two closest college friends, Natalie and Grace. They were the ones who stood by me during that first cold winter, when I couldn't even afford a new coat. Now, they were the ones smoothing each fold of my dress, pinning each flower into my hair, and whispering, "You look like a goddess." I smiled softly. Not because I thought I looked beautiful, but because I felt free. While I was getting ready, outside, the chapel's main gate opened exactly on time according to the schedule. Security personnel were stationed discreetly, dressed in formal black suits, earpieces in place, spread throughout the grounds. They were trained not only to maintain order, but to uphold the elegance and professionalism of the event. Ryan had coordinated with them thoroughly. They not only memorized the guest list but knew exactly which faces to keep an eye on. At 10:45 a.m., a luxurious white limousine pulled up at the gate. Jessica stepped out, her wedding gown sweeping the ground, sparkling with rhinestones so bright it was almost blinding. Her hair was pinned up high, adorned with a silver tiara. Beside her, my mother clutched the train of her dress, waving to onlookers as if they were walking a fashion runway. My father followed behind, in a silver-gray suit, flashing a smug half-smile, ready for the cameras. They approached the entrance with the kind of arrogance that suggested the entire ceremony had been crafted to glorify them. But, as they reached the security checkpoint, a tall staff member stepped forward, his tone courteous but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a restricted area. The bride arrived early this morning and is currently in preparation. We are not admitting anyone else wearing bridal attire at this time." Jessica froze. My mother, still unaware of what was unfolding, frowned and snapped. "We're family. My daughter is the bride. She needs to be let in right now." The guard shook his head, still calm. "We have an official list. Miss Emily Thompson is the bride, and only one individual is designated in that role today." Jessica's face flushed red, her voice rising sharply. "I'm her sister. I have the right to enter first, to assist. I was scheduled to walk down the aisle first. I'm wearing a wedding gown with my sister's approval and with the family's. It was all agreed upon." Creed. Another staff member stepped forward, holding up a tablet with the digital contract, speaking clearly. "We have no official documentation authorizing that. Any verbal agreement is considered invalid. If you're not listed in the official VIP registry and not in compliance with the event dress code, we're required to deny entry." At that point, my father stepped forward, voice low and tense. "We are the parents of the bride. No one has the right to keep us from entering the ceremony. A tense pause hung in the air. Then the tall lead security officer answered evenly. Sir, ma'am, you are guests. And guests follow the rules set by the hosts. If you cannot comply with the signed protocols, we will have to ask you to leave the premises. My mother's expression paled. Jessica nearly screamed, clenching her dress, attempting to push past. But two staff members gently extended their arms, blocking her not forcefully, but firmly, without room for negotiation. Guests nearby began to notice. A few turned their heads toward the entrance. Jessica snatched her phone and tried to call me. But my phone had been off since that morning. Inside, I was stepping out of the bridal room. Ryan stood waiting at the end of the hallway, wearing a soft smile that seemed to quiet the entire world around us. I didn't ask what was happening at the gates. I didn't need the details. I just looked into his eyes and knew everything had been protected. The ceremony space was decorated with sunflowers and white daisies, the flowers I've loved since childhood but had never been asked about. Guests rose as the soft piano music began to play. I took Ryan's hand and walked forward, step by steady step, down the aisle, no sister cutting in, no mother grabbing the mic, no agreements imposed. Just me, the man I love, and the people who truly supported us. The eyes on me weren't filled with pity or doubt anymore. They were the eyes of those witnessing a girl once called forgettable now walking like a queen. No one disrupted, no noise from outside. Everything flowed with an almost surreal smoothness. After the vows, as the officiant turned to us, I looked at Ryan, my eyes misty but my heart completely at peace. I do, I whispered. And, for the first time in my life, I said those words not because I was expected to, but because I truly meant them. As the wedding reception began, I overheard a few guests whispering. Sounds like someone got stopped at the gate. But no one made a scene. The event staff had handled everything so smoothly, so professionally, that not a single ripple of chaos made it past the doors. I saw Natalie stifle a giggle as she leaned in and whispered. If this were a movie, your sister's probably still outside shell, shocked. I just smiled. Not out of glee, but relief. Because for so many years, I had always been the one to step back, to give way, to grit my teeth in silence so I could keep the peace, to protect the family's image. Today, I didn't have to protect anything. I didn't have to ask permission anymore. I didn't know how long they stayed outside. I didn't know if they ever returned home. But I knew one thing for certain. This wedding was mine from beginning to end, and no one could steal that moment from me again. Not my sister, not my parents, no one. After the wedding, I remember the stillness, most of all a quiet that wasn't forced, or tense, or suffocating like all the family gatherings I had endured growing up. It was the first time I walked into a celebration without trying to please anyone, without looking over my shoulder, without shrinking myself out of fear of making my sister upset or embarrassing my mother. During the whole reception, I smiled for real, not out of politeness, not to maintain appearances, but because I felt free. I was in the right place, at the right time, as the right version of myself. But that peace didn't last long. Less than 24 hours later, a wave of emails crashed into my inbox like shards of broken glass. The first was from my mother, the subject line typed entirely in capital letters. Emily, what is this? I didn't open it. I forwarded it straight to our legal counsel. Next came my father, a long email full of accusations, deceit, humiliation, bringing shame on the entire family in front of hundreds. Then Jessica, no email, but a 3-minute voice message in which she cried, screamed, and accused me of betraying the family's trust, publicly humiliating your sister, and even threatened to sue me for emotional damage. Ryan was the one who read every message first. After each one, he flagged it and forwarded it to our lawyer. He didn't let me read a single cruel sentence because he knew I had already spent a lifetime listening to voices like that. Let them talk to the attorney, he said. You don't owe anyone an explanation anymore. A week later, my lawyer sent an official response. Every aspect of the wedding had been conducted in full compliance with the legally binding contract signed by all relevant parties. No terms were violated. No one was denied any lawful entitlement. And most importantly, any attempt to defame, spread misinformation, or harass would be treated as grounds for legal action. After that document was delivered, a deep silence followed, a cold, bitter silence with no attempt at reconciliation. But I was familiar with that kind of silence, and this time, I welcomed it like an old friend. Because it meant they finally understood, they could no longer control me. In contrast to the fury from my birth family came an unexpected wave of kindness from strangers. I received hundreds of messages of congratulations from college friends, coworkers, professors, even people I'd only spoken to a few times in the library. One person wrote, "I don't know much about you, but the moment you walked down that aisle alone, you brought tears to my eyes." A former classmate messaged, "I used to envy you for being so smart. Now I admire you for having the courage to live for yourself." A freshman girl from the tech club emailed just to say, "I never thought I could be like you. Now I believe I can." And then, on a rainy afternoon after our honeymoon, I received a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered from the department office. A handwritten letter from Professor Tilley, who had taught me machine learning in my junior year. In it, he wrote, "Emily, I've taught thousands of students. Many were brilliant, truly gifted. But you are one of the few who isn't just brilliant, you're braver than anyone I've ever known. Thank you for showing me that integrity and self-respect can carve a path of their own even when no one else walks beside you." I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, beside a photo of Ryan and me laughing together in a field of sunflowers. I stared at that photo for a long time, as if trying to preserve that feeling, a moment where nothing stood between me and the light anymore. That evening, Ryan walked into the room and saw me sitting in silence. He didn't ask questions, he didn't need to. He simply came close, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "You know," he said, "you've spent your whole life waiting to be loved the right way. But from now on, you'll always be the one who's chosen. Always loved. No conditions. No comparisons. Nothing to prove." I turned to look at him into the eyes that never promised a perfect world, but had always been the one place I knew I could come home to. And in that moment, I realized, the greatest victory isn't making others admit they were wrong. It's when you no longer need their approval. I don't need them to call me good. I don't need their apologies. I don't need their belated blessings. Because I have a new family not bound by blood, but by choice. A husband who never saw me as a failure compared to someone else. Friends who never treated me like a shadow. And myself, no longer the girl who once silently wished for a white dress and a spotlight that no one could steal. I had my wedding day. And the peace that came after it. No one stole the spotlight, no one controlled the stage. There was only me and the small but steady voice in my heart saying, "You are worthy." And if you're watching this story, if you've ever been compared by your parents, ever been called too sensitive, ever lived in silence just to keep the peace, then remember this. You don't need to be chosen to have value. You can choose yourself. And that is the bravest choice you'll ever make. Overcoming favoritism isn't about being loved more. It's about loving yourself enough that you no longer seek approval from those who never truly saw you. Live a life where you are the center. No permission, no justification, just walk forward and never look back.